Elara woke up to a cold, wet feeling. Her body ached as she slowly became aware of her surroundings, the chill of the water seeping through her clothes and into her bones. She blinked, trying to make sense of the darkness pressing in from all sides, her breath coming in short, confused gasps. The air was thick and heavy, carrying the scent of damp concrete and rust. The room was pitch black. She was alone. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the distant echo of dripping water. Shadows seemed to move along the walls, making the space feel even smaller, more claustrophobic. Elara's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to remember how she got here, but her mind was a blur. Suddenly, a loud hissing sound filled the air, sharp and urgent. It was as if the very walls were alive, groaning and protesting under some unseen pressure. The noise echoed off the concrete, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from at first. Elara strained her ears, realizing the sound was coming from the other side of the room. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The darkness seemed to thicken, and she felt a surge of dread. Water! The bunker was flooding. She could hear it now, the relentless rush of water pouring in, rising steadily with every passing second. The cold liquid lapped at her legs, sending a jolt of panic through her. Elara scrambled to her feet, her hands slipping on the slick, wet floor. She tried to steady herself, her heart racing as she realized the danger she was in. Fear pulsed through her veins, raw and electric. Every instinct screamed at her to move, to escape, but her limbs felt heavy, weighed down by terror and the icy water. The water was rising fast. It was already ankle-deep, swirling around her feet and threatening to pull her under. She could feel the current growing stronger, urging her to act before it was too late. She had to get out. Now! Desperation fueled her movements as she searched the room for any sign of an exit, her eyes darting wildly in the darkness. She fumbled for her flashlight, her fingers numb and clumsy from the cold. The small device was her only hope, her only weapon against the suffocating blackness. The beam cut through the darkness, slicing a narrow path of light across the flooded floor. For a moment, she felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly overshadowed by the grim reality of her situation. The main door was jammed shut. She could see it now, the heavy steel barrier warped and immovable, mocking her efforts. Elara pulled with all her might. It wouldn't budge, her muscles strained, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but the door refused to move even an inch. Panic welled up inside her, threatening to overwhelm her completely. The darkness, the rising water, the unyielding door, all of it pressed in on her, and she realized she was truly trapped, alone in the suffocating blackness. The hissing grew louder, echoing off the concrete walls like a warning. Each second, the sound intensified, a relentless reminder of the danger closing in. The air was thick with mist, and the sharp scent of wet stone filled Elara's lungs as she struggled to keep her footing. The water level crept higher, inch by inch, swallowing the floor and threatening to consume everything in its path. It moved with a slow, unstoppable force, seeping into every crack and crevice, turning the corridor into a treacherous river. It was now knee-deep, ice-cold and unforgiving. The chill bit through her clothes, numbing her legs and making every step a struggle. The water's weight pressed against her, dragging her down, as if the building itself wanted to keep her trapped. Elara's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the urgency of her situation. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts, fogging the air in front of her as she tried to steady herself. She had to find another way out. Panic threatened to take over, but she forced herself to focus, scanning the room for any possible escape. The water was rising too fast. She couldn't afford to waste a single moment. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for anything that could help. Shadows danced on the walls, distorted by the flickering lights and swirling water, making it hard to tell what was real and what was just her imagination. There had to be something. A hatch? A vent? Anything. Her hands skimmed along the slick, cold walls, feeling for a seam or a handle, anything that might offer a way out. Every second felt like an eternity as the water continued to rise. Then she saw it. A communication panel, high on the wall, just out of easy reach. It was her only hope, a lifeline in the chaos, a chance to call for help before it was too late. If she could reach it, maybe she could send a distress signal. She stretched upward, straining against the water's pull, her fingers brushing the edge of the panel. Every muscle in her body trembled with effort and fear. Hope flickered within her, a tiny flame against the rising tide of despair. In that moment, Elara refused to give in. She would fight the water, the darkness, and her own fear, whatever it took to survive. Elara waded through the rising water. Each step was a struggle. The water was chest-high now, pushing her against the wall. She reached for the panel. Her fingers grasped the edge. She pulled herself up. The panel was old, rusted. She started working on it, her hands shaking. The first attempt failed, and the second. Despair threatened to engulf her, but she couldn't give up. Not yet. Time was running out. Every second seemed to echo louder in the darkness, the relentless ticking of the clock, a cruel reminder of how little time remained. Shadows danced along the damp tunnel walls, and the air was thick with the scent of wet concrete and fear. Elara's breath came in short, sharp bursts as she pressed forward, the weight of urgency heavy on her shoulders. The water was neck-deep now, icy and unyielding, creeping higher with every passing moment. It pressed against her skin, chilling her to the bone, threatening to pull her under if she faltered for even a second. The room was almost completely submerged, and the only sounds were the distant hum of machinery and the soft, ominous lapping of water against the walls. Elara had to hold her breath to work on the panel. Her lungs burned with the effort, every second underwater stretching into eternity. She fumbled with the wires, her fingers numb and clumsy from the cold, desperately trying to remember the sequence that could save them all. Finally, with a sputtering spark, the panel flickered to life. A faint glow illuminated her face, casting sharp shadows across the waterlogged room. For a heartbeat, hope surged through her veins, but she knew the danger was far from over. A wave of relief washed over her, quickly replaced by a surge of urgency. There was no time to celebrate. The water was still rising, and every heartbeat brought it closer to disaster. She forced herself to focus, pushing aside the panic clawing at her mind. She had to send the signal. The others were counting on her, waiting in the darkness for a sign that help was on the way. Her hands shook as she reached for the communication device, the urgency of the moment making her movements frantic. With trembling fingers, Elara typed in the distress code. Each keystroke felt monumental, the wet keys slippery beneath her touch. She could barely see through the water and the haze of fear, but she forced herself to continue, knowing that failure was not an option. It was their only hope. The signal had to get through, or they would all be lost. Elara stared at the panel, willing it to respond, her heart pounding as she waited for a sign that someone, somewhere, was listening. The water reached her chin, cold and merciless, threatening to silence her forever. She could feel it lapping at her lips, the pressure building as the seconds slipped away. She held her breath, her heart pounding in her ears like a drumbeat of desperation. In that moment, suspended between hope and despair, Elara knew that everything depended on her courage, and on the chance that her message would be heard before it was too late. Elara hit the send button. The signal was sent, but would it be received in time? The water closed over her head. Darkness, silence. Did the signal break through? Would someone find her? Or would this be her watery grave? Only time would tell.